It is really an important step to do and to have the option to be your own bank. Would you trust Bitcoin if the code itself wouldn't be open source? Mining these days is not decentralized, not even close. It is totally centralized. But you have like 3 big parties. 95% of all mining equipment out there is Antminer. What if China as a government now wants to say, hey guys, you need to update your firmware and you need to put in this specific code which is actively forcing X? It's totally possible. What would be the case that we can actually decentralize mining back again? We need more pools.
Would you say in the last couple of, let's say, 2-3 years, it got more decentralized or more centralized?
Definitely centralization.
What is the better to do on a Saturday than speaking about Bitcoin?
Correct. It's the only thing that matters, to be honest.
Absolutely. Bitcoin is the only thing that matters. I think that's the perfect starting point for this podcast. How did you come to that? Or do you actually think that Bitcoin is like the main thing, that's the most important thing that we could dedicate our time towards?
I mean, initially I started looking into Bitcoin back in 2012. And back then I was like, what's this kind of magic internet money? It's floating around there. I had my Raspberry Pi. I had one of the early Bitcoin ASIC miners, the Jalapeno Butterfly. It was a completely mess, the distribution back in the days, but it was quite funny getting into it. And then I lost track for 4 or 5 years. And then I started going into it back again in 2016, 17-ish. And I really quickly recognized for myself that it is really an important step to do and to have the option to be your own bank, basically, to do anything you want with your money and nobody can restrict you. So that's the reason why I do think it's the only thing that matters. Like I had it, a friend of mine started an online business and was selling BitBoxes, for example. And 2 weeks in, he got a notification from his online shop distributor that he's now been denied accessing like the online payment things because of selling Bitcoin equipment. And I was like, what the heck is going on? This is crazy. Like, how come? With Bitcoin, this would never happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful thing where you have. I always bring the example of BTC is already completely Bitcoin only, so they don't pay in Bitcoin, they don't take, they don't pay in fiat, and they don't take fiat, so they only are Bitcoin. And then it's like you have a website, and everything is Bitcoin, so nobody can deny you the service, which is an amazing thing. And you're really big on open sourcing Bitcoin mining. That's at least the first impression that I got when I saw your profiles.
I mean, you could say so. Yeah, I'm really big into open source in general. Like, there's the term FOSS, which means free and open source software. There's also the term FOSH, so free and open source hardware. And I got into a project named BitBox 2 years ago, and it kind of intrigued me. It was kind of weird because back in the days when I started becoming a software developer and I studied business computer science, and now I'm a software developer for a big company. And yeah, it was kind of a thing for me to produce code and do something for the greater good of everybody, not only for myself or for a company that you're working with, but out of a sudden I was watching YouTube lately in the on the couch, and I was just chilling there, and I saw someone posting a video about nerd eggs, like these small screens, like these screens here where I can just put on some mining firmware and you have a beautiful screen, you can watch the Bitcoin price. And I was intrigued. I was like, that sounds interesting. I never really thought about the possibility of creating your own Bitcoin mining hardware. And a couple of days later, I found about the project BitBox, and I got intrigued into that because it is completely different from what's available currently on the market. We only do have like 3 different manufacturers that produce proprietary hardware and software. We have Bitmain, which is the largest manufacturer when it comes to Bitcoin equipment on the mining side. Then we have Avalon, which is sort of its own thing. And we do have MicroBT, the Watts miner. And sure, we do have a couple more that are now rising up on the market, but that's basically it. And you don't have any option to actually verify what's going on. And a funny thing about that is back in 2012, I believe, 2013, somewhere is this date, there was not a bug, but a feature from Bitmain called endplate. And this allowed them to actually remotely control or shut down the devices wherever you set them up. And it was discovered by the community back in the days. And it sort of comes into the same state of what we're trying to approach these days. Like I'm now from the community Open Source Miners United, this one here, we have developed the BitX, the small Bitcoin miner, which is completely open source on the hardware level and the software level. And we will intend to do that forever. We are not thinking about changing anything or producing stuff that is proprietary, because we want to give back the option for the people to get into Bitcoin, not only on like, hey, I can use this for my daily uses, buying goods and everything, use it on Lightning, on whatsoever, but also understand the core ethos behind it. Like we have the mining side, which is one pillar. We have the node side, which is one pillar, and we have the transaction side, which is the third pillar. And I usually do compare all three together, but the truth about it is nothing would work without the other. So the complete house, if you call it like that, around Bitcoin would collapse if one of these pillars would fall apart. And having a market where 95% of all mining equipment is from proprietary hardware manufacturers, or at least I need to say 99.9%, because we are so small now, but changes are coming, and we need to do a change. We need to raise the awareness of the people that there is not only the thing of, yeah, you plug in a machine and you trust it. No, you can actually verify it, which is the ethos of Bitcoin. Don't trust, verify.
And the three main devices, they are all closed source.
So when you do compare it to other things, like the Bitmain miners or the Watts miners or what else is out there, there is nothing else than the BitX that is open source. And to be clear here, the BitX device itself is open source, but there's one proprietary hardware part on it, which is the ASIC chip, which is produced by Bitmain. So what we did initially to figure out how to work with it is we actually reverse engineered the ASIC chip. We figured out how to use it, how to send commands over it, how to give it the correct voltage and everything that it needs. And then we worked our way through it to actually figure out how to use it. So the BitX itself is open source, and we have published everything on GitHub. We have our own wiki page on osmu.wiki where you can actually go into it and you can take a look on what's on this device. How does it work? How can you utilize it? So basically everybody could now just purchase chips from Bitmain and build their own device, because we have reverse engineered the chips, sort of not on a physical level, but on the software level. We know how to send them commands and we know how to work with them. We don't know how to produce them, but the good thing is we have high hopes for the upcoming open source ASIC chip from Blocks.
It's interesting. And for me, it's super interesting because I always looked at that kind of. It's the only fishy part about Bitcoin, where you have those big Bitcoin mining pools where basically like free are dominating the market, and you also have then the hardware side of it, where you also said already there's like basically free device manufacturers that do all the things that I always looked at like the biggest problem within Bitcoin. Bitcoin is still like by far the most decentralized and safest thing ever, but nothing is 100%. I would say. What is the actual attack vector if, for example, an Ain't or like those kind of manufacturers are getting co-opted or something like that? Or differently asked, how important is open sourcing Bitcoin mining to not 1% Bitcoin mining is open source, but like maybe 40, 50, 60% in the future is open source? How important is that for someone that is just holding Bitcoin in his own self-custody solution?
I mean, the question that you need to ask yourself is basically, would you trust Bitcoin if the code itself wouldn't be open source? And that's the whole ethos about the whole project. Like, Bitcoin was initially proposed to the world as an open source project, everybody can verify it, everybody can change it, can do whatever you want. You can create a shitcoin if you want to, but nobody would care. There are plenty of other implementations or other implementations that utilize the Bitcoin code. For example, we do have Bitcoin Core as a node site. We do have the Bitcoin Knots as a node site. So there are a couple different implementations of it. And that's the whole part about it. If you do hold Bitcoin yourself as just for whatever purpose you want to do, just to store value or what you're intrigued in, sure, that's the thing. But if you ever want to transact anything on chain and you want to do a transaction to another party, how does this work? You need the mining side, you need the transaction side, and you need the node side. So we're back again to our three pillars. And initially, or usually when I do go, for example, to any conferences, anything else, I try to start my speeches with a question to the people. Ask yourself, if you attend to any sort of event, have you ever heard about Bitcoin mining? Sure, you do have, probably. But ask yourself again, have you heard about how this works? And there's the funny part. Usually when you go somewhere and when you try to get resources or information about things, especially around Bitcoin, where it is a keen and a high interest that you do understand what you're using there, because in the end, it's your money. You're trying to spend something, you're trying to use it to buy goods or whatever, or store value. That's whatever purpose you do prefer to use it for. But you try to get information about the node side, you try to maybe get some privacy information, but why don't you get into mining? Because there's not enough information. That's the whole point. And people are undervaluing the mining side of it. And that's what we are in our community trying to change. We're trying to change the awareness of mining in general. We're not there to get all these big parties away. We are totally aware about the fact that getting like big mining farms and facilities and companies out of the market is these days basically impossible. But the important part here is to give the people that are actually using Bitcoin as their daily driver the option to get more information and everything in the open source manner as Bitcoin was intended to be. And that's the thing.
So should then everyone run their own small mining hardware at home?
I mean, it's a thing. Usually it is hard to answer because the thing is, of course, we do have the BitX. It is a one ASIC chip device, which with the latest revision that we do have, the BitX Gamma, which utilizes the newest ASIC chip from Bitmain, you can reach up to 1.2 terahash at like default settings. You can overclock it over 2 terahash, but usually when people think about mining, they do think about, I need to get daily revenue. And that's also another point that we're trying to point out here. Mining these days is not decentralized, not even close. It is totally centralized. We do have like 3 big parties. Just do yourself as like a viewer later on in this video, do yourself a favor, go to mempool, click on the mining side and take a look which are the 3 biggest pools. Now you do understand we're really close to getting into centralization, or we are even there currently. That's the thing, like we are so far apart from decentralization, and that's what needs to be changed. So when you would ask me, should I run a BitX at home just for the purpose of earning daily a couple of sats? I sadly need to answer that's probably not going to happen, because most of these pools that you can connect to, they do have a threshold on which kind of amount you can pay out these Bitcoin or these sats over to your UTXO. And therefore, there's this issue of how can I use it? What we usually do recommend to the people is use it as a solo miner. Try your luck. And earlier this year, someone was lucky. Let me quickly look over. We had the block 853742. I do have it 3D printed out there on the wall. I can show this later maybe. And this block was found by BitX on the CK pool, which is a solo pool. And that's the thing about it. Currently, solo blocks are really, really rare because everybody is trying to combine their hash rate and find a block. But if you do take a look on the block pooled or on the pool distribution, we do have Foundry, which is the biggest pool because it is like many facilities combined to one pool. We do have Antpool. We do have Brains. We do have other pools as well. And most of them are even proxies, which is also a thing. Like you look at mempool and you think, all right, here we go. We do have AMP pool, Viability, F2 pool, and so on. And you do think, oh, we're kind of decentralized. We do have plenty of different pools, but if you're really honest to yourself and if you do a little bit of investigation, and I highly recommend everybody who is listening to this, do yourself a favor. On X, there is an account called B10C, which is a dude who is absolutely amazing. He's working on mempool.dev, and he did a little bit of research on which pools are actually proxy pools. What do I mean by that? It's really simple. Ant pool is basically the main pool. And if you want to start yourself a smaller pool, like Brains pool or SEC pool, you do not have enough hash power to actually pay out regularly to the people that are mining to your pool. So what do you need to do? You need to connect your pool to a bigger pool, such as Ant pool, which is called a proxy pool. So it appears to be that you are your own pool, but indeed you're not. You're mining to another pool, and you can clearly identify this on chain. So this actually phases into the issue that we are seeing these days, that mining decentralization is not there. And with the whole project around BitX and Open Source Miners United, because it's not only BitX, we also do have other mini mining devices that we created. There are so many. We do have our own Discord server, but I can't name all of them currently. It's just too many. Our idea here is not to force you into solo mining. You can do whatever you want. That's the whole purpose. It's open source. You can verify it. You don't need to trust us. I even recommend you not to trust us. Build the source code on your own and build the firmware on your own with the source code. Everything is on GitHub. If you don't like it, change it. If you have a request, then request it, and maybe we put it into it. That's the whole purpose about open source development. And yeah, I mean, mining in general needs to be on a side where people get back the power and not big companies. Because you asked me initially, and I was talking way too long about all other topics here. What if there is like a big pool or mining manufacturer, mining hardware manufacturer, and he's now being forced by his regulation or something else into a specific area? It totally could be the case. I mean, imagine 95% of all mining equipment out there is Antminer. What if China as a government now wants to say, hey, guys, you need to update your firmware and you need to put in this specific code, which is actively forcing X. It's totally possible. It is possible. But that's what we're trying to fight here. We're trying to fight these possibilities that no government can come after you and you're not relying on proprietary source code that you cannot verify.
I heard about other projects too. I unfortunately, Bitcoin mining, especially the technical side of it, is not my expertise. But this allows me to ask all the beginners questions that probably most of the audience also has. I heard about other projects like Ocean Mining and Datum also. How does this fit in that whole picture?
So the idea about Ocean, and I hope I recall it correct here, is we do have the main the main issue here that we do see. I've already explained it, that pool decentralization is not there. So what would be the goal, or what would be the case that we can actually decentralize mining back again? We need more pools. And that's what Ocean is trying to do here. And that's the thing. Ocean is a nice pool. You can connect your miners to it. You can also connect your BitX to it if you want to. You can enable Lightning payouts there, because they do have a threshold on how much Bitcoin you need to accumulate before they do an on-chain transaction to you. And if you cannot fulfill this threshold, you can always activate the Lightning payout. It's a little bit complicated on how to do it. I did like a small go-through tutorial on my YouTube channel. It's not that detailed, so I need to probably do another one again about it. But you do get the point. You now have another option. But Ocean is not the solution. We need more. That's the thing. And then is also this new thing called Datum, which is like an implementation of a couple of things of Stratum v2 from Ocean, which basically allows you to host your own node at home, for example, with the Start9 node, and you just implement Datum on it, which is basically just a thing. It communicates with your node, with the blockchain on your device, on your node at home, and you create the block templates yourself, but Ocean still needs to accept them. So it does not solve a truly decentralized vision of mining. It is better, but it's not there where we need to go.
Would you say in the last couple of, let's say, 2-3 years, it got more decentralized or more centralized? Like where's the trend currently going in Bitcoin mining?
Definitely centralization. I mean, take a look. We do have so many companies, and that's also the catch that I usually do tell to the people that are attending to any conferences or anything else. If you do think about mining and you do question yourself, what have I heard about mining? Usually you will only find firms and companies in front of you who are telling you, hey, you can host your mining machines with us. Come to us and host with us. We are a big company in Kenya, in the United States, and you can host your mining equipment with us. The biggest issue, obviously, is these machines are big, loud, and they consume a lot of power. So it is not really feasible to run them at home. And that's where we try to change it a little bit as well. Like, you don't need to purchase yourself like a big, heavy industry mining device. You can go with a small device like a BitX, put it up at home, and totally forget about it. And what's even better, you totally forget about it, and someday you might even find a block. So how cool is that? And there's this whole thing about BitX that if we do reach, let's say, 100,000, 500,000 devices, and we're getting closer and closer to this, to these numbers, that we are forcing more and more blocks to be mined solo than on pools, which is totally what we want to achieve. Because I said mining is not decentralized, and in the last couple of years it got even more centralized. Pools are growing, and they don't have any intent to stop that. Why should they? They're making more money.
I really like the projects of where we mine Bitcoin and use the heat or use something else from it. I really also like, there's a bunch of home projects. Now there's even like commercial products around that, where people just like got and heat their pool or heat their whatever with the Bitcoin mining. Not farm, but like there are a couple of Bitcoin miners at home, which is really cool. Where do you see that going? I see so many different services now. There's Bitcoin mining is a service where you can just like buy a Bitcoin hardware wallet there, and they do all the things for you, and they provide you a nice overview with that. But then also we have more centralization, I guess. But depends on if you can choose your pool and stuff like that. Then you can do Bitcoin mining at home with BitX. You can start your own Bitcoin mining farm, but that's probably for only a few people that can actually do that. Or you can use Bitcoin mining in heaters, like 21 Energy is using the Bitcoin miners in heating. You can do your own facilities. Like there's a bunch of options out there. Is it in the future at some point everything will just mine Bitcoin, all the devices that maybe use heat or something like that? Are we coming to that?
I mean, it's quite funny to actually think about it. My honest answer to that would be no. And the reason for that is, if you do think about heating, and if you want to heat up your home or your pool, you can totally do that with Bitcoin mining. There are many solutions of it. As you said, 21 Energy does have the ovens, the oven and the oven pro or whatever, and there are other solutions as well. And you can use it to generate excess heat and use it at your home. Sure, that's a thing, but that's not how most of the people think about heating. Most of the people that do care about heating, they actually think about how much energy do I need to put in and how much heat do I get out. And if you talk about heating with Bitcoin mining, it is like 1-to-1. You put in 1 kilowatt hour of power in it, you get 1 kilowatt of heat out of it. With other solutions that we do have, it's better, to be honest. That's the thing. But I mean, if you say electricity is totally cheap and I don't really care about it, and I just need this heat anyway, or I can reuse this heat, for example, to heat up my pool, it's completely a cool idea. Especially, you do need to change your calculation because now you're earning sats, you're making money back. So it is hard to calculate everything, but I do say the average person, the average consumer will not get it. So I don't think that's going to be happening, but I do think for 10% of the people, it's actually viable. I mean, I'm doing it myself. For example, this office here is heated completely just with Bitcoin mining.
Then like heating, so like everywhere where we need heat. And Max said that to me as some crazy statistics that like 50% of the energy that we use is directly or indirectly used for heating things, heating your home, heating something that you melt plastic or whatever, which is quite a big amount of that. And if we can only replace that energy and incorporate Bitcoin mining with that, which would be in most cases a no-brainer. There's so many examples of like where apartment buildings switched out the heating system to a Bitcoin mining heating system, and they got all of a sudden a surplus of money versus paying for the heat.
That's the thing. Sorry for interrupting you here, but I mean, take a look over into the Netherlands. There is the biggest European pepper farm, and it's been heated by Bitcoin mining. So if you do purchase yourself in Europe a pepper, it is likely going to be from this place because it's the biggest pepper farm in Europe, and it's going to be heated with Bitcoin mining, which is quite funny. I mean, just take a look over at Bitcoin Brabant. I think they are the ones who provided this service or got them up into that. So that's totally funny. And I totally agree on this point that if you do have something where you just need a little bit of heat, or where heat is not the important part about it, but you still need it, then sure, changing it over to Bitcoin mining is a no-brainer. But if you're talking about heating your home, there are maybe other viable options. But it becomes really, really difficult to calculate everything. As you said, it could be the case that you do now have a surplus of money. But I mean, how long do you actually heat up your home? Usually do you heat it up to a certain temperature, and then you need to hold this temperature. I'm not really into the heating section of everything, but I mean, I guess it can be quite a little bit tricky with Bitcoin mining.
Interesting. Yeah, I just looked it up. I never heard that the pepper farm. It seems to be a real thing. Tomatoes
it is
pepper.
totally free. It is totally real. If you do purchase yourself a pepper in Europe, it's like 80%. It's gonna be from this farm, and it's gonna be heated with Bitcoin mining. They changed, I believe, from gas over to Bitcoin mining because gas was so expensive a couple of years ago in the Netherlands, so that they said, all right, screw it. And Bitcoin Brabant stepped up and said, hey, guys, I have a perfect solution. Sure, you use electricity, and it's just a one-to-one exchange from electricity to heat, but you do have a surplus of money then. And there's this quick video on X. Yeah, it's just totally funny. I've been over in the Netherlands a couple of weeks ago. I did a workshop over there, and I talked to the guy. It's absolutely amazing. It's just funny. And that's the thing. So you said it's completely a no-brainer if you do need it as, for example, heating our peppers or tomatoes. Totally. So why not change over? There's also another thing. We do have big data centers or other things that need a little bit of heat. We can use heat over there, and we can utilize Bitcoin mining for that. Or if you do have, I don't know, like you have a big facility and your workers are working in there and you need to heat it, you can do that. But we are getting to a point where we do see, in the most cases, it makes sense on an industrial level, not on a home level. So I still stick to my answer that I do think the average consumer will not change over, but that's totally fine. Maybe you do run your BitX at home and you don't care about the hash rate that you're providing, and you'll find a block someday.
I partnered up with Coin Vigilante. This is the most beautiful Bitcoin timepiece that I ever saw created by anyone. Look at that beauty. I love it so much. Coin Vigilante made a perfect Bitcoin watch. That's the perfect, subtle, elegant way to go out there and show that you are a Bitcoiner. And that watch brand is Bitcoin only. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there. And of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. And make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. If you watch or listen to my podcast on a regular basis, I guess you already bought some Bitcoin. And now the most important step is to keep the Bitcoin. Keep them secure in a hardware wallet. My personal recommendation for hardware wallet is the BitBox. It's super secure, it's simple to set up. It's also a perfect gift for a friend who has still their Bitcoin on an exchange. And you can get a 5% discount with the code Robin at the checkout. Visit bitbox.swiss/Robin to get your BitBox. And the next step is to really level up your sovereignty as an individual. You have to have the most secure self-custody setup. You have to secure your own devices. You have to protect your privacy. You have to set up an inheritance plan. And depending on where you live, you even want to have a plan B, a citizenship where you can move in case something goes really wrong. And through all those steps, the Bitcoin way is guiding you through step by step. And if you visit thebitcoinway.com/partners/Robin, you even get a 30-minute free call to find out how you can level up your sovereignty.
Yeah, I mean, you don't lose a lot of money if you run a BitX, right?
No, that's totally the thing. Like, I showed this in the camera. This is a NerdX, which is just an iteration of a BitX. It has another screen, the NerdMiner screen here, but the other thing of it is basically the same as with a BitX. It's really this small. You just plug in 5 volts to it, and it consumes between 15 to 20 watts of power, depending on what settings you set up. And then you do have 1.2 to 2 terahash of hash rate. You point it somewhere, and you do have every day, every 10 minutes, you have the lottery at home, basically. That's usually what I do tell the people, because honestly, speaking about it and making daily returns in sats with it is not feasible, and I wouldn't recommend it. I tried it on Ocean with their Lightning payout. It works, but it's not intriguing for me to actually set it up like that. I would totally go for solo, and all my equipment that I do have here at home, or all these prototypes that I do develop, all of them are just solo mining. And by the way, while I said that, I need to clarify, like, I am from OSMU, the community Open Source Miners United, behind the BitX project, but I'm not the inventor. The actual inventor is Scott, who is basically the instigator of the BitX project, and I'm one of the maintainers and developers on this project. So I'm mostly on the software part. I do have a little bit of knowledge on the hardware level, but that's not so my topic.
Wait, so you tried with Ocean with the BitX or with like a normal Bitcoin miner?
I do have one S19 miner, which is running off of solar in my garage, but this one is also pointed to Ocean, but I didn't try it with this one. What I did is I used 4 normal BitXs, and then I used a BitX Hex, which is like a little bit bigger. It has 6 chips in it. It needs a little bit more cooling, and it draws up to 70, 75 watts and produces like 3 terahash, something like that. I tried that. I let it run for a couple of weeks. I set up my own node. I set up my own Lightning channel. I opened up everything. I signed my Bolt 12 offer, and then sats were flying into my account. It's as easy as that, as it sounds, but to be honest, it needs a little bit of time, and you need to know what you're doing. Like, if you just expect to click a button and it works, that's not going to happen. You need to do a couple of things, maybe even command line. We need to be a little bit more consumer friendly.
Is the BitX the best way and the most inexpensive way to learn about Bitcoin mining?
Totally. I mean, so here's the catch. I talked about the NerdMiner, and if you do think about the NerdMiner, it's just like this little screen, which does have a little bit of code on it so that it can run the Bitcoin SHA-256D algorithm and produce a couple of hashes. So it calculates a couple of times. This is a fun way to learn it if you want to go into the code and read it and understand how it works. But that's not how Bitcoin mining these days works. What you need is an ASIC chip. And under this heatsink here, there's an ASIC chip. I currently do not have one laying around here, but these ones are really tiny, like this size here. And that's how mining these days works. So what you really want to do is, if you are interested in actual Bitcoin mining, get yourself a BitX. They are really cheap these days. It started last year, it was kind of expensive, but I think this year a couple of resellers are down to $99 per device. So it's inexpensive to get it and learn it. And the best part about it, it is totally granny proof, I call it, because you plug it in, it opens up a Wi-Fi on the screen. It tells you, hey, I'm ready. Connect to my Wi-Fi. You take up your phone, you connect to the Wi-Fi. It tells you, hey, I'm not configured. Configure me. Set up my Wi-Fi. Set up my Bitcoin address. Click save. Reboot me. Boom. You're done. That's it.
And then the more complicated thing that you did is connecting more of those together. What you said is you need a little bit more.
I mean, when we're talking about Ocean and connecting Ocean with your BitX devices, it's as easy as going into the settings of my BitX device and point them to an address. Like, I need to point them somewhere, and this address needs to give me a job, and I need to fulfill that. So all these devices, all that mining equipment can actually do is just receive work, process this work, and send back an answer. So we need a node or something like a Stratum proxy in between to communicate with pools or with servers or with your node. And that's basically what datum is in this example. So if I would set up my own datum at home, I just would point my BitX to this, and then it would magically work, you can say.
Interesting, yeah. And it's I probably should make a video out of it. I just purchased one and set it up myself. It would be a great way of like learning about it myself, and maybe also the people here. Really cool. When we talk about Bitcoin mining, it's always for me where we started with GPU mining, and then just like people mine a lot of Bitcoin back in the days on their laptops. Is that something that is still possible? Is that something where you like you can still run? You don't need to purchase the BitX. You can just run it on your PC, if you have an old PC laying around.
I mean, sure, you can do that. I'm not really sure if you want to do that. That's the catch about it. So ASIC, the chip that I'm all the time talking about, stands for Application Specific Integrated Circuit, which is a complicated word, but the only thing it means it's a small circuit, a small component, like you can think about it like as a small, tiny CPU, which is dedicatedly built just for one task: do Bitcoin mining, the algorithm that is behind Bitcoin mining, SHA-256D. And that's the only thing it can do. If I would send it instructions to, hey, show me a picture, it couldn't do it. Or if I would send it other instructions, it couldn't do it. It can only do one specific task, which is mining the algorithm. And yeah, so if you're talking about the early days, back in the days where you had like the Bitcoin software, which was not called Bitcoin Core, Bitcoin Notes, or anything else, Bitcoin was originally just Bitcoin. You had the option, like it was a UI thing, you can call it, and you had the option to click on start mining. You would start mining on your own node, which is running then on your PC back in the days. These days, it's a little bit different, but you can still run Bitcoin mining software on your PC. I wouldn't recommend it because it's so inefficient. As I said, like these tiny chips, they are truly and only built for Bitcoin mining algorithms. And your CPU is built to do other things. Your GPU is also built to do other things. So in theory, yes, you could do it. But to give you a little bit of comparison, if you take like an RTX 3080 and try to mine Bitcoin with it, you maybe get 500 mega hashes, maybe. And this one here can do tera hashes. So 10,000x multiplication here. So yeah, and the power consumption is totally another thing as well.
Obviously, it's extremely inefficient, and you don't get really. You're very unlikely to get anything out of it. Basically,
very unlikely. The lower your hash rate is, the lower is the likelihood of actually finding a block or contributing to the overall system of Bitcoin. So it is arguable if the BitX itself makes even sense, and we had plenty of people, plenty of doubters in the early days that told us, hey, this is never going to happen. This will never find a block. And out of a sudden, we found a block. Like, it is working. It's totally possible. And there are more devices that are coming online. And that's the thing. The more devices that are coming online and don't care about the hash rate, don't care about the government, that are truly decentralized somewhere at home, you can't put them down. If your government doesn't like your company, they can put you down. And now you need to close up your Bitcoin mining company. With BitX, this will never happen.
But wait, just to clarify, the one that found the block that was completely on its own without a pool.
So there's this big misconception about what a pool is. So a pool these days is basically nothing else than someone is running somewhere a server and you're connecting to it to get work for your Bitcoin mining device. That's the only thing it does. And now when it comes to mining solo or in a pool, it is basically the same. The only difference is if you mine solo, your device receives works. And if you find a block, you get basically the full block reward. If you mine to a pool, which is still the same, we're still mining to someone else's server, then you would share the reward. Even though you found the block, you will share it accordingly to the amount of work that you put into that block. So solo is, I find a block, I get something. I don't find a block, I don't get anything. Pool mining, there are different payout schemes, and this is a complete own topic on its own, where we can argue hours about because it's so messed up these days. Pool is basically, I mine to a pool and I get payouts no matter what, if I find a block or if I don't find a block.
So okay, so the one that found it was on its own and got the full block reward or almost the full block reward on it for the one thing that's running. And if you run it themselves and you just connect it to a pool, you only get a very small amount of payouts because you only contribute a very small percentage to the pool.
Correct. So this particular miner was connected to the solo pool of CK Pool, and CK Dev behind this pool, who invented this pool or wrote the code for it, is also the creator of CG Miner, and therefore he's a truly legend in the Bitcoin scene when it comes to mining.
Really cool. And it's interesting. That topic is so, it's super interesting because in Bitcoin, I was in Bitcoin before I started the podcast over 3 years already. Mm-hmm. And I thought I know quite a lot of things about Bitcoin. Then I started the podcast, got to know that I don't know anything about Bitcoin. and now I do my 340th episode with you, and it's like I still have so much to learn, especially the technical aspect, because I think podcasts are usually skewed towards talking about the monetary aspect, why Bitcoin makes sense and all those things. So I really like getting the other side of things where we just talk about you probably wouldn't even call that talk that we have now a technical talk.
It's this thing, like, as I said, usually if you talk with people about Bitcoin, they only care about, hey, I want to run my own node. Hey, I want to be private if I do transfer you funds, so I use my own node. Or how can you make money with it? Or maybe you want to host your device on my company because I'm a cool company. That's it. You don't get anything else. And this is the crucial part that we're trying to change here with this whole movement, I'd like to call it, because Open Source Miners United is there for the people, and we do everything in public and for them. Like, we are not a company, we are not an organization, we are just these, I'd like to call it like that, these weirdos in the internet who invented an open source Bitcoin miner. And that is truly Bitcoin, nothing less.
Yeah. That's a true Bitcoin ethos, peer-to-peer, open source. Do you think that I talked about that with the block trainer? Do you think that everything is coming over the long run to open source, as open systems are superior long term over closed systems?
It's quite an interesting topic. For example, in my bachelor thesis, I kind of wrote about the open source theme and if it actually helps the overall economy or not. It's wild to answer, to be honest, because the reason being is we do have plenty of companies who do have source code that is the only purpose of the company. If they would publish it, they had no purpose because they need to protect it. So on this term, I don't think that we will see open source in the long run will win over proprietary things. But in the community thing, like for example, Bitcoin, I do believe everything that is open source is far more superior, especially we have so many specialists in Bitcoin that could clearly point out any flaws or issues in your code. For example, let's imagine you now build up the layer 7 solution for whatever on Bitcoin, and there's some weirdo on the internet pointing out to you, hey man, there's an issue. If you run it like that, somebody could steal your money. That's not going to happen if you do decide to build proprietary. This is only going to be happening if you do build it in an open source manner. And that's the reason why we do it. We have the software, we have the hardware open source, we have all the projects that we do are open source. We even do have our own pool. And still, I need to say that again. Pool is just these days another name for I do connect myself to another server. Whether the server pays me out in solo terms, so I do get the full reward or nothing, or I share my rewards with other people, that's another level. So we also created a pool, which is also available. If you do have an Umbrel node, just go on it and go into the marketplace and search for public pool. That is created by Open Source Miners United. If you want to run it on your Start9, there's also in the community registry, you can download it there. It's totally easy. So setting up all these things in an open source manner is for us the only choice, nothing less.
Are you confident that we get in Bitcoin long term again with decentralizing the mining pools and decentralizing the hardware?
It is my biggest hope that we do achieve that. And the reason for that is purely because I'm feared about what will governments do if they go onto that train, if they hop onto that train. Because we do see it now. More and more governments are interested in Bitcoin. Some of them don't like it. Some of them deny it in their regulations or whatever. And others are interested in it. And what if we now out of a sudden do have governments that are interested in mining and forcing mining companies, for example, into a specific thing? Now we do have an issue. So we need to create something such as our open source project. It's just an example. I mean, you can create whatever you want. So you don't need to get yourself a BitX. Just build something on its own. It's open source. You don't need us. We don't need you. We need everybody in the community because that's how open source communities live. But you get the point. With open source, you can do whatever you want, and with regulations and governments, it becomes quite hard, to be honest, if we talk about open source and how things are going to happen out in the long run. Because I do believe that open source in this, as I said, I do believe that open source will win in the long run, especially in Bitcoin. If we're talking about other topics, I don't know, like other companies and source code thingies that are not tied around a economical system, maybe they don't need to be open source.
Yeah, I mean, there's where we can see it now with Nostra and social media. It will be very interesting if Nostra gets to a point of being the dominant social network. Right now, it's very small compared to like the Facebooks and the Twitters. Twitter is so much smaller than Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite rare seeing someone on Nostra who is not a Bitcoiner. It's quite funny.
It's a small net, but it could work. Like I feel like Nostra is an interesting experiment, and I like optionality because optionality always brings us to freedom. And if we have if we have like a spectrum of freedom where you have on the left side the LinkedIns and the Facebooks of the world, and then in the middle maybe there's like Twitter where it's a little bit more free, but there's still censorship going on, and then on the right side you get to how are the things called, Blue Sky and Nostra and all the other social media apps, or how's that thing from Trump called? I don't know. Truth Social or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, so there are so many things. I mean, it's in social media we really have a lot of options, and that's my main thing is like we have to have the options. But I hope that we get more mainstream to Nostra and those options, and less on the Facebook and LinkedIn side of things. That's kind of my hope. So maybe we have mass adoption of open source technology in social media and communication and in community when they build better user friendlier things. And the learning curve is actually really good, because I went into Nostra a year ago. I think the app I used was Damos. I think was the app that I used there. And I was like, that doesn't feel good. And social media really lives on that it feels good, and the onboarding is quick, and so a lot of people can join, and it needs that network effect. This year, people bugged me about it, so I was like, I should try it again. And it felt so much better. I used Primal, and it really feels good. It really feels like a Twitter thing.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
I'm a little bit confused by Primal. Like I always was looking for another relay connector that I could use on my PC, but Primal, I don't know. It feels so buggy to me.
On the computer, I never use it. I only use it on the App Store. I don't know how it's in the computer. But yeah, that's kind of my where I see also like maybe open source gets to a good point of adoption. Really cool to also see your thoughts around that. Really cool. Perfect. Then we have one question that I asked each and every one of my guests is, what can we learn from you now besides Bitcoin, and maybe also besides open source?
So my main purpose for being out here, being at your podcast, or even doing my own YouTube channel is only one thing. I want to educate, and I want to give information to the people, because none of these systems would work without it. It doesn't matter if it is open source or not, or if it is Bitcoin or not, but you need information, and you need a good place where you can find them. And having someone who can actually understand the technical terms and break it down to people who are not a little bit less into these technical topics is, I think, a crucial part. And that's where I do see myself. And I say learning from myself is never stop learning, and always think twice about your decision. Don't trust, verify.
I like that. The Bitcoin ethos, and you can lay that in whole your life, like the don't trust, verify, proof of work, all those kind of things.
Everything.
Absolutely. Really cool. Thank you so much. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And your question from the previous guest is, if you could orange pill anyone in the world, who would it be?
I could orange pill anyone in the world. I'd probably say my son, because he's only 5 months old.
He will be orange pilled, right?
He already does have plenty of Bitcoin socks and everything.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because I think like the kids from Bitcoiners, they will they will grow up and think that Bitcoin is normal.
Yes.
Because that's the only thing they know. And we see it with Samantha from she's like, I think 13 years old, and she was on my podcast, and she said like it was so normal because her dad always talked about Bitcoin. She used Bitcoin. So she thought the world is already on a Bitcoin standard. And then she got introduced to fiat when she was like 11, 12 years old. So
it's funny.
I hope that's where we want to be. And you as a father can now indoctrinate Bitcoin in the next generation.
That's my goal.
Really cool. Thank you so much, Lars, for being on. Thank you so much for taking the time. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and reach out to you? I think you also have a YouTube channel.
So I'm basically everywhere. Noster, X, YouTube, Facebook. I don't use Facebook, so I don't have that. But all of them, just WantClue.
Nice. WantClue. Go to WantClue.
Yeah.
Perfect. And thank you so much, Lars, for being on. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.